That's so cute.
Some people trickling in.
Hi!
Oh, hi!
They're so cute. Oh my gosh, it's Janelle. It's Janelle. Oh wait, WECode.
We didn't do the...
Yeah. We. Hi! Oh my gosh. Okay. Deep breath in. Where is she? Dear WECode community, friends, and partners, welcome. What an immersive and immense privilege it is for all of us to be in this physical space together. We're so grateful that you came all this way, whether it is a 20-minute drive or a 20-hour flight or a click of a button on Gather platform online. You made it. Thank you all for your commitment and your presence. We're beyond excited to experience this weekend together with you.
When we were planning for this conference, our team really grappled with the question of what makes us, WECode, different. And after many discussions and reflections, we came to the realization that it is really our commitment to audacity and to challenging the expected. WECode did not start in 2014 because we wanted to do what everyone else was doing in the technology space. No, in fact, we wanted to actually change the culture by infusing it with empowerment, community, and equality. Every subsequent iteration since then has been a uniquely brutal fight in bringing that mission to life. And fighting for this mission is not about numbers or the titles, though we have reached thousands of people across the globe and invited extremely impressive speakers, many of which you will hear from this weekend. Impact often lies most in the subtle moments. I still remember watching a speaker cry last year because it was her first time being in a space like WECode. And she commented how spaces like this didn't exist early in her career. To seeing students' eyes light up in mentorship circles, hearing from people who say the stories that you can't really hear about in public settings. And also my own personal experiences with having the opportunity to forge deeper relationships and friendships that are rooted in mission, like this one. Sorry. As we experience WECode together, we encourage everyone to really seek out those moments, to share them and to embrace them. This year is no different. The mission we sought to fight for in 2014 at WECode's inception has only become more important. We find ourselves in the midst of a world in flux, whether that is within the rapid development of artificial intelligence or wavering institutional support for gender advocacy within STEM, doing the constant uprooting of how we understand and operate within the world. It has never been more critical for us to embrace the challenge, to reflect upon the principles and axioms that guide us, to think beyond the frame and rise to the occasion together. In these tumultuous times, the apathy in the face of uncertainty, especially as we consider the ever-present challenge of gender advocacy in tech, can seem like the option of less friction, the diplomatic option. But we should ask ourselves, who will these decisions serve? More often than not, it serves the systems and default decisions that already allocate opportunity unevenly. And it leaves the burden of change on the very people who have the least margin to carry it alone. That is precisely why WECode matters now more than ever.
The roots of my personal WECode experience are steeped in that same tumultuousness. My first WECode wasn't on the stage. It was actually where you guys all are, sitting as an attendee in an audience, except I was there virtually during the 2020 high school WECode conference in the middle of the COVID pandemic. When an in-person conference was no longer an option, the easy choice for our WECode team would have been to scale back, to narrow the scope, reduce programming, and wait for some semblance of normalcy to resume. But instead, we decided to adapt. Rather than shrinking the ways that we could reach our community, this organization expanded them. It transformed to meet the moment when we needed it the most, to keep connection alive when connection itself was the hardest thing to build. When I look back on that very first WECode experience, more than any of the content of speakers and any single piece of mentorship I received that weekend, what survives most vividly in my memory of that weekend is instead the people. It is the fact that attendees joined all over the world, across time zones, some in their PJs, a bit sleepy, some balancing the conference with many family responsibilities, or a quiet corner of a shared room. It's hearing different mother tongues in the same Zoom rooms. It's speakers who felt comfortable enough to be authentic. And somehow, across all the differences between each of us, we were united by a single thread. Not just a love or a curiosity for computer science and technology, but a shared recognition of the mountains ahead of us. And with that, a promise that by coming together, we could weather the storms and face them as one. That promise is what brought me back. Take some time to look all around you. Raise your hand if you see someone that you do not know. I'm sure all of you, hopefully most of you at least, raise your hands. My name is Kitty Wei.
My name is Hannah.
On paper, we're the co-chairs of WECode, and specifically the WECode 2026 conference. But we are, just like the rest of our amazing team and everyone else in this room, people who are daring to dream a little bigger. With that said, we are so excited to officially kick off the WECode 2026 conference. We'll be passing it off to our Director of Programming, Thalia, to introduce our very first keynote of the weekend.
Let's go. Can we give him a round of applause?
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for being here today. My name is Thalia, and I'm the Director of Programming here at WECode, and I'm so excited to have the opportunity to introduce our opening keynote speaker, Francoise Brougher, the CEO of Pebble. Francoise has led at some of the most influential technology companies in the world, including Google, where she held senior leadership roles across global business operations, Square, where she helped scale and strengthen its business organization, and Pinterest, where she served as the Chief Operating Officer, leading global sales, partnerships, and operations. But what makes her journey especially powerful is that it hasn't been linear or pre-planned. Growing up in the south of France, she didn't come from a business or technological background, didn't see herself as the typical successful student, and explored everything from medicine to engineering before carving her own path. Across industries, countries, and career reinventions, Francoise has built her leadership around curiosity, adaptability, strong relationships, and the belief that you are always in control of your choices, even when you're not in control of the outcome. Today, we'll be hearing about embracing detours, staying a learner in a rapidly changing world, building teams that multiply impact, and designing success on your own terms. Let's please give a warm WECode welcome to Francoise Brougher.
Thank you, everyone. I can say it's the first time I'm doing public speaking in a church, which is kind of interesting, and it's also the first time that I do a talk with only women, and especially only women in engineering. So I'm actually very thankful that I got invited, and I'm very proud of everyone and each of you. I think Talia already gave my talk. I have been working for a lot of years. I'm a generation older than you, and I thought today what I can tell you is whatever you think you are today, that may not be what you are going to become tomorrow, and to kind of embrace the uncertainty and embrace the opportunity. So the first point of my talk is, even so I'm someone that I've been very driven all my life, I'm not going to just fake it, I also embrace opportunity. Meaning I don't have a plan, I never had a plan, but always choose to go where I saw an opportunity, and I saw many opportunities in my life, and I was open to them. So what I tell people, especially younger people, is really be open to what the life has for you. You know, I grew up in south of France. My dad was a middle school teacher, and my mom was a freelance journalist. In south of France, there is no tech, very little business. France is a very centralized country. And I ended up loving math and physics, and which I'm sure I have this in common with a lot of you if you study CS. And I ended up going to north of France, because it's where in France you study engineering. You have to go north. And I went to engineering school. But while I was in engineering school, I not just studied engineering. It was at the time, and again, maybe your parents tell you this, I was a teen at the end of the 80s. And at the end of the 80s, Japan was a country where if you like technology, you were thinking about. And I took the chance. I went to Japan, I found a job, and my first job after college was in Japan. All my colleagues, you know, I went to an engineering school where 3 women among hundreds in my class, and everyone had a very common trajectory, and I did choose to take a risk and go to Japan, and I think it's one of the best decisions I made when I was 21 or 22. I was not the typical successful student. I actually have some learning disability. I'm dysgraphic. So it's very hard for me to write. This is also why I like math and physics, because I didn't have a lot to write except proof. I never actually dreamed about what I wanted to do, but I dreamed about everything. So, you know, when I was younger, I thought I was going to be a doctor. Then I thought I was going to be a pilot. And a reporter, because my mom was a journalist, and then I ended up being an engineer and working in a plant in Japan for my first job. So what makes a difference in my career is I did seize every opportunity that came my way, even if they were completely untraditional and was not the path everyone followed. You know, when I was in school, as I told you, I studied engineering, but I actually learned Japanese on the side, just because I love Japan, and I decided if I wanted one day to go there, I need to study the language. I joined a European company. I study abroad. So if every of university offer you to study abroad, I really recommend it. It's one of my best experience. And I really had a non-linear trajectory in my career. I did many different things. I was a consultant at some point. I went to management consultant at some point because I actually went to school on the other side of the street, and it was an expensive school. So I needed to pay the bill, and I decided I was going to management consultant because they would pay the bill for me. But something I also created at some point, I went into the jewelry business. I created a small startup that was importing black pearl from Tahiti. And all my friends, it was this in San Francisco, and all my friends was going into tech. It was the year 2000, and I went and I designed jewelry for 2 to 3 years before I went back to the corporate world. I do think what helped me, you know, after that, of course, I have been very successful in Silicon Valley. mainly because I'm very curious. So I did approach Google in 2004 when it was a very small company, and I ended up getting a job there, which I did love, and I ended up growing at Google, doing many, many, many different things. And that was fascinating because, you know, I joined at 2,000 people, and when I left, we were already 40,000. So the journey you get through this experience is tremendous. I went to Squares, Pinterest, so I had a very, what would be considered on paper, a very successful career in Silicon Valley. But if you had asked me when I was in college, I even didn't know where Silicon Valley was. So I do think it came from one of the things that I also encourage people, which generally students have, especially students like you guys, is really be curious about everything. I said that in college, while I was studying engineering, I did study Japanese for fun. I also was an actor. And I was an actor because every school in France has some kind of actor program, and we were 3 women, so we got all the girl role, because we're only 3, so it was very easy. It was not that competitive to be an actor in this school, but it was really fun to do. I think it's so important to try any experience you can have. Even my experience design jewelry was really fun and something not expecting for me. I also encourage people, especially people that are in STEM, and my kids are in STEM, we're in STEM too now as I graduate. I also told them the most important thing you can do is read. I think still at my age, I still read. I'm part of a book club with a bunch of women of my age, and we exchange books. We meet every 2 months. It's really fun, and I think it gives you a sense of perspective, but also it helps you, which is the most important thing if you want to be successful in the corporate world, is to have pattern recognition. And actually, book and magazine and anything give you this library of patterns that you can study and then apply in the real world. You know, I think seek people outside your world. I'm someone who loves the outdoor. I spend a lot of people in the mountain with people that have 0 education, but it's really fun to hang around because they have different passion. So I always also tell people, you get a lot of richness in your conversation when you hang out outside your circle. And right now, it's a really specific moment in technology. I know it's overused, but I do believe AI is changing everything. I think the access to programming become very universal. I can tell you I'm the CEO of a company. I started learning vibe coding. I haven't coded since I was 27. Love it. So I think it's a chance for everyone to continue to learn and experience new things. So something I really encourage everyone. The other thing that is very important that was very beneficial for me is I can adapt to everything. Meaning, you know, I work in Japan, the culture is very different. I built a computer integrated manufacturing system then on a very old computer with people that didn't speak my original language. I spoke Japanese, but really broken. And I learned a ton from this experience. Cultures are very different. I can tell you, I joined this plant, I was 22. My boss was Canadian. He was living in Tokyo. The plant is 100 miles out of Tokyo. And so I'm the only woman there. It was a terrific experience. No one wanted to rent me an apartment in this town because I was 22 and they decided I needed to live with a family. I couldn't be an independent woman. So it took me a while to actually, it took me over 6 months, and I ended up finding something that was half hotel, half apartment, because the community out there didn't understand that a 22-year-old woman could actually live on the countryside in Japan and rent her own place. The other example I give, and I give this to my American colleague, or the ones that are born in North America, is I work with this guy. So when I arrive, the secretary of the plant, resigned because I was too young for her. When she saw my passport, she said, I'm not working for a 22-year-old. And then the head of IT resigned, same story, was not going to work for a woman that is 22-year-old. And what happened there is there was a guy that was probably in his late 20, and both of us worked night and days for like the first year because it was quite a complex problem. And we really worked very hard on these things because it was, when you install this kind of system in manufacturing, even though it was a small plant, you really have to rethink process, workflow, stock, anything. And so at the end, I was his boss, and I told him, hey, I'm going to give you a salary increase, and I'm going to promote you. And the person showed up in my office and said, there is no way you promote me. It's not acceptable in this culture. So the guy asked me not to be promoted. It was early 90s, I was in Japan, I was 22, and I was trying to do the right things. But I do think understand culture is so important. I think cultural intelligence rebuilds trust with people. If you're able to work in every culture, it's really help you understand other people's point of view. And I think you kind of develop an empathy that helps you influence people. I pride myself, I can work with many, many different people, and I think that's very important, especially I think when you grow up in a monoculture, trying to understand what people are coming from, and you see the situation generally coming faster at you, and you can adapt much faster. The other one, which I talked about already, is detours are okay. We all do not need to have a linear trajectory. And I told you that I did at some point stop working in corporate and did my jewelry business. I can tell you what I'm doing today. So I had a quite successful career at Google, Square, because all these companies I went in very early. I can tell you at Google, when I left, I did manage all the ads business. And I had 6,000 employees by then. I was making good money. If people have looked at Google stock, it has done well over the last 20 years. And then I decided to go to Square, and I started working with Jack and Dorsey, that was the founder. I had 17 people there. So I've moved from 6,000 to 17 people, and it was super fun to go back and work on the content. So again, many people don't understand why did she do this, and I do think for me it was about learning something new experience. I had been for almost 9 years at Google. I wanted to do something else. Even today, if you think that I was retired because I worked all my life since college, and I had a lot of family issue, including with my parents who passed away in the last 3 years. And so I took some time off, and I was on the board of a company that was not doing well. It was a small startup, Series B. We are 500 people. We have revenue, significant revenue. But the board, I was on the board, the previous CEO didn't work out, so they asked me to come in and be the CEO. And for what I have done up to now, it's a much smaller company. I used to run $16 billion at Google. Here it's like super tiny, but I'm super happy. I'm not sure it's going to work. It's a full turnaround of a company, but I love it. And I'm so happy I went back because, as I mentioned before, I think what AI enables you to do right now with a team of 150 engineers is actually remarkable. But again, if you ask me, well, why do you do this? Why don't do something else? And I actually love new things. I love the adventure, and I think that's really important. And you cannot predict the outcome of where you are going to go. I think people that have the hardest time are the ones that have high expectation, plan an outcome, and then don't realize this outcome. I really say, people, please enjoy the journey. It's actually a fabulous journey if you start appreciating it. And it was for me, and even if Silicon Valley has changed tremendously since I started working there, I worked there at the end of the 90s to today, and the culture has changed tremendously. But I did appreciate the opportunity to live this journey of technology evolution. Some things that I wish people had told me, and this is why I'm super happy to see all of you here, is relationship matters. And it's something that I didn't know when I grew up, and I didn't know until very late in life, because personally I'm an introvert, I'm an engineer, yeah, you see the stereotype. So I don't go out of my way to actually create relationship beyond the work relationship or the school relationship. And I do think it's very, very important. I see the most successful people are the ones that have been able to work their network. So now I have a huge network because of the work, but I wish I had started this, you know, when I was in my 30s or even earlier. So I encourage you, especially you are here, you never know, talk to people, just tell your story. People will remind you, then one day you don't know, you can call them out of the blue and try to find what you want to do. And I think, and the reality is people hire people they know or people they know about. And I think it's very sad to say, but if you are just coming in and no one's know you, really hard today. Especially you, it's the same that for college application. It's very hard to stand out if you don't have a way to get to know people. And I, you know, again, I have 3 kids that are a little older than you, and their first job was hell because, again, they had to network to find the people that will hire them. So I always say, make connection in college, in grad school, everywhere you go, and be open to it, and make an effort if you are not the best networker in the world. You know, I think, relationship compounds over time, and you stand to appreciate when you are my age, because before this, I did not. I also, as I said, I had 3 children, so it's not that I had a lot of spare time to network, and I wish I had started earlier. Finally, like if I want to tell you something, and then we can ask more questions about business, which Talia will ask me, which I can tell you more about what I actually did in technology. No one defines you except yourself. So really understand what makes you happy. It's very important. I think right now what makes me happy, I have a dog that I'm playing with. I hike every day with her, and it's really fun. And it's what makes me happy because my children have left home. But I do think find stuff like this for yourself that really make you happy is so important. Define the person you want to be. Don't let people define you too many times, especially when you are women, especially if you're in engineering. The road for you tend to be, or at least for my generation, was very narrow. Like I felt I didn't have a lot of breathing room. And I do think I always think about who I am, and just don't let people define who you are. I think it's the biggest thing. And there is drawback by doing this, and we can talk about it later. I also want to tell you, choosing hobby and family is okay. There is everyone has their own path, but not choosing them, it's also okay. As long as you have breadth of experience, and that will help you develop what I talk about, pattern recognition. And I think success is very personal, and everyone defines and designs success on their own way. And I really encourage you not to be too harsh on yourself, and design success as you want it to be. No one else can design it for you. So that's the end of my keynote. I hope it was useful. I'm sure some of it you already heard it, but I think Talia is going to ask me more questions about the business I ran. What do you want to see?
Thank you so much, Francoise. Can we just give her one more big round of applause, please? Thank you so much again for sharing your journey and your invaluable insights. Now we're going to continue the conversation in a fireside chat format and dive a little deeper into some of the themes you just discussed today. You've led organizations through moments of massive growth, from scaling revenue to taking a company public. When you look back, what helped you stay grounded in a clear vision while moving at that fast speed?
Yeah, so that's also the story of Silicon Valley. But when you are there, you actually do not realize you are moving fast or you are leaving something very unique, because you are so entrenched into the work you do that you just don't realize. You realize when you get out of Silicon Valley and you talk to normal company. I am in the board of a few companies, and I realize it's not the same pace or the same intensity. I think, you know, the stuff I talk about is an IPO process. I did 2 IPO processes in my career, which is pretty unique. I did the Square IPO and the Pinterest IPO, and these are pretty intense moments where you really have to sell the company, and being able to tell a story is so important. So even it's tech company, the tech companies that are really successful are the ones that are able to tell their story very well. So an IPO, it's actually a marketing event, and you have to be able to have a narrative. And it's a lot of things for people that go to startups, that do fundraising, and others. Every funding event is very much a marketing activity. For me, what was important, stay grounded, don't lose your true North Star. You know what you want out of the event. Generally, you want money, so make sure you actually get as much money as you can from Wall Street, which is quite an interesting process. It's a very bonding experience with your team. Generally, the CEO, the CFO, and generally I manage revenue and the business. It's really fun. It can be very intense. But I think you have a hard time to reflect when you are in it. You kind of realize afterwards, and you have to understand what you are doing there.
Thank you for that response. Having held leadership roles at companies like Google, Square, Pinterest, and now as the CEO of Pebble, how has your perspective on leadership evolved across different stages of growth at these companies?
It has not that much evolved. I think what has evolved is a little bit the way you approach problem. I do think something that is kind of important, that people always think about entrepreneurship, about something that is crazy and not structured. The more structured you are in your thought, in your process, in helping people, the better you are from the get-go. There is actually an HBR article that I probably read 15 years or 20 years ago that talk about how structure create creativity and chaos. And I think it's very important. That's why technology companies are quite successful, because they are run by engineers, and there is quite a bit of structure. Everyone knows what they are actually, their role, what they are doing. There is structure around when you are reviewing deal, when you are doing the revenue, when you do product roadmap, when you do a little more planning. Even so, planning in tech companies generally no longer than 18 months. But there is structure, because structure really helps you. And whether it's a startup, whether it's where I am in Series B with 500 people, there are startups, there is process that are very well known. I'm not sure we teach them in school, called the objective and key results. I don't know if anyone in the audience learn about it, or I have no idea. But basically, every year you redefine, and it's very metrics oriented, of where you want to be 6 months from now, 12 months from now. So structure is actually important at every, and it's also helped people really all rowing in the same direction. So it's quite important. And if you are a leader, you have to make sure you provide this structure. You don't let room for a lot of ambiguity, because then you stagnate and the company doesn't move forward.
Yeah, building on your experiences of leadership. You've been open about how experiences with gender discrimination have shaped your career and leadership perspective. How did those experiences influence the way you think about building inclusive, high-performing workplace cultures today?
Yeah, so I'm not so sure. If people Google me, they have found out by now. But I think I was one of the executives in Silicon Valley that actually sued their employer when I was the COO of Pinterest. Mainly was for pay. I was the only woman at the C-suite, and it was a story about paid equity, with the pay was very different, which is something that often happens for women. especially women from my generation, but also the very insidious behavior. Building inclusive culture is very hard because the reality is when you are in this old company, your need to hire is very, very fast. And therefore, you don't spend the time to really look around and say, is there another woman I can bring in? And that's the trap that Silicon Valley is in and is still in. And I can tell you it was not like this. I feel, and I probably should not tell this, I feel there has been a little bit of step back in the last 4 to 5 years. When I started at Google, I mentioned we were 2,000 people, so it was a small company. And we had a process where the CEO was looking at whole hire at the company. So every Monday, this person was looking at all the resume. And basically, if we didn't have 25% of women, 25% of technical people were women, we were stopping hiring. And I think this is the only CEO I have seen done this. We don't do this anymore at Google or any other places. That's why I said I feel it's been a little bit going backward. But this is why I really encourage everyone to be pinged 100% on LinkedIn. It doesn't matter. Just go out there, don't mind getting a no. This is a question of volume, and sometimes we don't see the women come in.
Yeah, thank you for your response. Through your work as a board member of Too Good To Go, an application combating food waste, and Allen, a digital health company promoting integrated healthcare, you've connected corporate leadership with broader social impact. What does leading with purpose mean to you, and how has that shaped the choices you've made throughout your career?
Yeah, so I generally tended to like company where there was a strong mission. That was super important to me because I wanted to make sure I could embrace the mission. You know, when I joined Google, it was providing information to everyone everywhere. My parents were still in France. The first time I did Google Video with them was a magic moment. I think now it's everyone do FaceTime and we know all of this, but 20 years ago we did not. And it was really about, I spent a lot of time when I was at Google working also in developing country to bring internet. Literally, you know, we are buying cable to connect Africa to the rest of the internet cable. What people don't know is also Google is the biggest owner of undersea cable, which very few people understand and know. It's really an infrastructure company. But I think it was meaningful for me. You know, when I was at Pinterest, I was a very heavy user. And it was all about creativity and really helping people express this creativity differently. So that's something I was attracted. When I went to Square, it was all about, you know, before Square, fintech literally didn't exist. And it was about democratizing payment for small business. This business couldn't accept card. You know, the founding story of Square was one of the founder was an artist. He was doing glasswork. And someone came to his gallery, wanted to pay with a credit card. He didn't have a terminal. He missed the sale for like $2,000. And that was a founding story, and I think there was a lot of inspiration there. You say, okay, I'm going to help small people actually access something as mundane as being able to access credit card. So it was kind of fun. So that has been, but again, it's my choice. People have their choice of the company they want to join and what's going to inspire them. And looking at, frankly, looking at the leader who leads this company, for me, is quite important. I would not have gone in some company we have today that to me are less inspiring than they used to be.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Those are all the prepared questions we have today, but we do have some time left over. So we're gonna turn to some Q&A from the audience. So if anyone has any questions, you're more than welcome to just raise your hand and we'll try to get to as many as possible. Yeah, in the front here.
Maybe you give her.
Here, wait, don't worry. You can take this microphone.
You should take the mic, because otherwise.
What are some strategies that work for large companies but do not work in emerging companies?
Sorry, I didn't understand your question because the mic didn't.
Yeah. What are some strategies that work for large companies but do not work for small companies?
Ooh, yeah. I don't know that much. You know, I don't think strategy is very easy. It's all about move. Like the best way for me to define strategy is about move. And there is move probably you will not make in a smaller company. One of the ethos we have when we started Square was start small, because it was very important for us that we didn't jeopardize anything and we tried testing. And sometimes when you are in a bigger company and you want to make a move in something that is completely new, and even if it's small, it's probably harder because you have all the process of strategic planning and others that get in the way. But again, strategy is about move, and big company make big move, small company make big move. The size of the company doesn't always define what the strategy is. It's more the risk appetite of the leadership that matters. And in general, in smaller company, of course, they have a little bit more risk appetite than in bigger company.
Thank you.
Yeah. Feel free to project or I can pass, or you can pass.
Hi. So something I really admire about Pinterest is the UIX layout and how you guys purposefully design the page to capture user attention and have ads placed in to capture revenue. So can you tell me more about that process of like how you can create apps and businesses that actually catch user attention instantly? Can you tell me like more about the process of that?
So again, Pinterest was built initially as a collection of items. So people collect on the board, and then we introduce a feed when you can actually access all the image of everyone. And you know, if you know machine learning, AI, computer vision, all of these things is algorithmically based. We see what you are watching, and we serve you what we expect you to like. So something that always bothered me on Pinterest sometimes, it actually doesn't allow you to explore something different unless it's volunteer, it's from you. It's like all this, like it's the same for Instagram. All these social platforms are extremely good at understanding who you are, what you like, and just, it becomes this echo chamber of your thought, your tastes, your political opinion, and everything. So what I did like about Pinterest is we were, like, one of the first things I did when I joined Pinterest is I stopped every political advertising. Whereas political advertising is a trove of money for all this social network, because today, the world where we live, there is a lot of PAC, and candidates get zillions of dollars, and they use it on social platform to influence. The choice I made, and when I joined, and it was in 2013, I said, we'll not take any money from political venue, like any party, candidate, or anyone, and I will purposely declass every political content, and not providing an echo chamber for them. And I think this is one of the secrets of Pinterest, and this is why it's still a place of joy, and where you can find fun stuff, because we are not taking you to the rabbit hole of division. But at the same time, if you really pay attention, we are taking you to the rabbit hole of the taste you like. It's less dangerous, but it's based on the same principle of machine learning and algorithm.
So if you were to go back to Pinterest, how would you go about breaking that echo chamber? And one more question, did you encounter any opposition when you decided to make that decision to make Pinterest a non-political affiliated website?
How did I come with this decision?
Face any opposition from like
yes,
the executive board?
I did. The sales team hated me because it's very easy revenue, I can tell you. come like midterm this year, they are already like, again, I'm not a stockbroker and I should not do stock advice, but I can tell you all of them are going to go up because it's zillions of dollars are spent on political. So yes, the sales team hated me for this. They tried to convince me many different ways to do. So the way to break the echo chamber is taking risk again, is showing stuff that you don't expect and have this in your algorithm. It's not that easy actually technically to do. But I think that's a logical, conceptual way of thinking about this is giving you more opportunity to be exposed to more different things. The problem of Pinterest now, like every other platform, is they are so reliant on advertising dollars. Is 1 every 5 pin is an advertising. And it's generally better taste, it's better design, it's supposed to connect you to the right person or the right product, but it's still fundamentally the model. You know, this is the problem of social media. The reality, it's all driven by the monetary result of it. I think the one I like is Snap because it disappears, but they're not successful from an economic standpoint. But at least you don't have this echo chamber and this more communication tool for people.
All right, so you've had a lot of jobs throughout your career. How do you decide when is the right time to move on from a job?
Okay, so here's my rule. Again, it's my rule, it's not for everyone. Every 4 years, I question myself. Do I still want to be in this job? I can tell you staying in a job, maybe at the beginning of your career, it's okay. Getting a job and staying 18 months, 24 months. In my generation, also things are changing so fast nowadays that I should not. I think I felt I couldn't prove impact fast enough. Even so I know I had impact, it was difficult to claim impact. I think when you are 4 years, especially when I had leadership position like Google or Square, probably the first step of my career I was moving faster. So, but that's my rule. I say, okay, 4 years, then the impact is undeniable. I can claim it, it's mine. But at the same time, I need to do something else because I get bored very fast.
So as someone who has so many different interests, how do you decide what you want to work on next? So maybe which venue of your interest do you want to go down?
Something passed by me and I see it. As I said, I never have a plan, never ever have a plan, which is really painful to say to people that are generally so organized, and if you are here, it's because all your life you have planned, you know what you want to be, and telling people I didn't have a plan really, it's very hard to explain this, but I do not, and I see something interesting. What I have is I'm extremely open-minded. So everything that goes through me, I say, oh, interesting. And sometimes I go to rabbit hole I should not go. But it is the way I am. It's very difficult to change people. But the 4 years mark, when you are like more established, I think when you are younger, every 2 years you can change, no big deal. But when I look at higher executive, if I see an executive that has changed role every 2 years, it's a red flag, right? What did they actually do?
What's the biggest obstacle that you faced in your technical and academic career?
Technical, you know, I started in doing computer science. Technical, I move very quickly. As I said, I work as a technical person really for 3 years as coder. And then I went to the school on the other side of the street, which is a business school. And then I ended up going in technology, but not in technical role, because I like different things. The biggest obstacle is the one we talked a little bit about it. You know, I was in my 50s and I always prided myself to be able to navigate the system. As I said, I pride myself to be adaptable and I can figure out to work with everybody. And then I arrived at Pinterest and I realized that in my 50s, I really hit the glass ceiling. And I talk about it many times, and I think it was very, very, very hard for me to accept it. And then it was so hard for me, and I was in a situation which, because I was at all this successful company, I didn't care about my next job. So I was able to really talk about it, and I ended up suing the company, which is so not in my personality, but I ended up suing the company, and I tell you, I won a $22.5 million settlement, which has been the biggest in the history of gender discrimination in the US. Just FYI, my kids were not happy, but I did give back this money to organization that actually promotes diversity. And so I'm part of a few organizations that help at college. You know, the problem with diversity and inclusion is when you talk to the tech people, the idea is to open a mass school for girls that are 4 years old. And I try to convince them that they should really take care of the women they actually have in their company versus starting worried about the 4-year-old. I think it starts in your garden, and understand the talent you have and how you can actually benefit from this talent, and as a consequence make them successful. So that was the hardest thing, especially because you never heard about me before this incident, because I did pride myself to never talk anywhere. So it's kind of changed my perspective on things.
Hi, I'm Nishi, and my question is, how do you plan a company from like when you get the idea to like starting it and making it to a business? What are like the steps you take to make it as successful as possible?
So every startup that I have seen successful, and I'm not a founder, but the one I joined, always come from a founder insight. There is always this origin story of a founder. So I give you the example of Square. One of the founder was a glass blower. He was actually an engineer too, but he ended up being an artist too, couldn't sell his stuff. The origin story of Pinterest was a founder that loved collection and thought doing collection on the web was going to be the greatest things on world. And Pinterest was a collection tool before it became a social media tool. Google was obvious. It was about really making information, and this was people that, again, you guys don't remember this, maybe your parents do, but the internet was a bunch of links, and you couldn't find anything, and you had a bunch of crawler like Alta Vista, Yahoo, everyone. They were not the first one thinking about it, but the way they thought about the algorithm, and it was really a computer science problem, is to link pages on the net instead of linking URL. And this was the base of Google. So it's always come from an insight that the founder has. I think if someone tomorrow come to me and say, I want to create a company, so my first question is, what's your insight? Because that's really what derive actually company value and everything else.
Thank you very much for your talk. And as an exchange student from Japan, your talk is really encouraging for me. And I'm curious, what's the most encouraged and motivated to you when you were in the difficulty? And did you have any like a specific routine or things you do to motivate you?
No. As I say, I'm actually, I grew up in a culture that was the south of France, very laid back. I was not in a competitive environment at all. So I think you start developing routine when you train for something. I didn't train for any marathon or anything else. So I'm not this person. The only thing I can tell you is I always tell this story to my kid. My brother, I have an older brother, and he's starting taking swimming lesson. And I was there because I was watching him doing swimming. And one day the coach told, hey, do you want to learn how to swim? And I said, oh, I know how to swim. I jumped into the pool. They had to take me out of the pool because I was drowning. So it's just I tell this to my kids, I'm always go 2 feet in, and sometimes that is not successful. But I take risk much more than anybody else. And I enjoy it, but not everyone is the same. Yeah.
Hey, I'm truly inspired by your journey and how genuine you are. I had a quick question though. So you have scaled operations at Google and Pinterest through a very different technological eras, right? And how do you think agentic AI will fundamentally change how CEOs or operations leader build their or manage their teams in the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, so the beauty of agentic AI is if you have a good engineer, you can actually build it yourself. So right now, I had a team of over 300 people in operation in the company I have in. So the first things when I arrived, we really built what I call purpose-built AI, meaning AI, you cannot develop a model for the whole company. It has to be about onboarding, customer support, customer journey, everything. So you do this, and we are at a phase now, like every people in operation has access to this data, and my company work a lot in the world of compliance, and a lot of data has to be very precise. But now we are actually drafting response directly from AI to the customer, and it's very easy to draft response if it's generic or but compliance, it's about law and taxes and all this stuff. And now we are at the page where we can actually take action on the platform directly. I will not, this is controversial, I will not buy agentic AI from an agentic AI company, but I will try to develop it myself with a few engineers, and I will go directly to the large language model. So where I am, where I'm using, and every 3 months it's changed. I have OpenAI credit, I have Claude credits. I haven't used, which is kind of sad, I haven't used Gemini for this yet. But I'm going to start because I think they have reached now a point where you can use them. So yes, it is changing. Like every work that can be automated is going to be automated. But critical thinking is not. So that's what's power for the human.
Thank you so much for your talk. I really related to your point about adaptability. In my experience, being adaptable sometimes feels like constantly preparing for things to go wrong. How do you manage that while maintaining that optimism?
You know, again, optimism is something you have or you have not. I'm like always a half full glass person. I just don't let things, you know, I don't mind. I never regret anything. I never look backwards. And I can tell you another anecdote, which is fun. When I got married, I married with a person from this country, and there is a tradition of the first dance. And while we had supposedly trained for it, but again, as I said, I'm not the best trainer, we mess up the things incredibly. I've been married for 30 years. My husband is still telling me how we messed up the first dance of our wedding, which I couldn't care less. 5 minutes later, I had forgotten, and I couldn't care less. So I do think I advise people, you can't change what happened in the past. So whatever happened, try to develop pattern, because there is a lot of learning you can get, but don't sweat it. Continue. It's okay. It's behind you.
I think we have time for one more question. Excuse me, up here. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah?
Yeah, okay, we'll do 2 more. We'll do up there and then we'll do down here. Okay, go ahead.
My question was, how would you define success when you have accomplished so many things in your life, but what is one way that you would define success?
One thing is going to look, I grew up in a family that had 0 economic power. Right now, I have the economic power to do whatever I want. And again, if you grew up in a place where you were lower middle class, I think economic power matter. And I think being able to do whatever I decide at any point of time, freedom is my success. Right now, I can do whatever I want, and that's important to me, which I didn't have. You know, I went out of the business school, I had so much debt, and that I went to management consulting because that was the only way I could pay it. So sad I did enjoy the work, but that's the only way, and again, maybe it doesn't speak to all of you, but for me, the economic power that my success give me the freedom I never had before in making choices. So I think that's really important. That's how I define my success. I don't need zillion like a bunch of my colleagues in Silicon Valley, but I need enough that I can make these choices.
Hello. All right. Hello, Francoise. My name is Amanda, or Amanda in French.
Yeah.
Fascinating to hear about your story. I just learned that you are a mother. We women oftentimes are told that you can either choose either a career or family, and you just completely switch the narrative on that. How would you say that motherhood has contributed to your success?
Yeah, it does, because I'm very chilled. I don't lose, I'm not having a fit anywhere because my kids have done much more than any employee can done to me. So I think it's kind of ground you pretty well. I was very lucky. I'm just not going to. I was very lucky because, I joined Google. I had 3 kids under 4 years old. And I went to see the founder. Again, it was a small company. I went to see the founder, and I told him, hey, every day at 6 p.m., I'm out. And at this time in the company, we were 2 women having children. We were only 2. And the other one is a very dear friend of mine, which actually is a graduate from Harvard undergrad and passed away last year. We were the only 2 women with children, but we really forced our way through. And the founder and everyone said, okay. And then, at Google, we had daycare on site. Again, you can do this when you have a company that is so successful that you understand this. The problem is many companies are not that successful, they cannot do this. But daycare people could go and see their children. So we were very, very fortunate. And by the time I left Google, my kids were in school, and it was much easier. But yes, I was very lucky to be in this environment. And you have to be strong enough and have the opportunity, frankly, to be able to say, hey, I'm going to work very hard, but from 6 to 9, as with my kid, I do all the stuff men do from 6 to 9.
All right, thank you, the audience, so much for all of your questions. It looks like we've come to an end with our time here with Francoise. Can we all please just give her one big last applause?
And really good luck to all of you. Again, I'm more on the end of my time, but I'm very envious of you to be in your 20s in the world we are going in, and it's going to be fascinating, so enjoy it.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you. All right, so for our next events, in 15 minutes, we'll be hosting our Startup and Entrepreneurship panel right here in Memorial Church. But we'll also have several other amazing solo speaking events in the Science Center, so feel free to look at our schedule and choose which ones you want to go to. Thank you all again, and have a great start to the rest of your conference day.
they're lucky because.
Hi everyone, we're gonna get started. Thank you so much for joining this event. My name is Thalia and I'm so excited to welcome you to our Startups and Entrepreneurship panel. Joining us today is Kate Levin, a customer enablement lead at Glide, who harnessed her love for education to make impact in the startup space. Sharita Rustanovable, which is the Vice President of Startup Banking at JP Morgan and the co-founder of A2C Boston. Cara Peterson, on the far, right over there, the co-founder and CEO of Describe AI and the co-host of Building AI Boston, a podcast. And Allison Byers, the founder and CEO of Scroobius and the author of the soon-to-be-released guide, Fundraising for the Rest of Us. Before we dive into our specific questions, can we please give all of our speakers a big round of applause? All right, and I did a short intro, but I would love to give each speaker the opportunity to introduce themselves properly for a couple minutes. So, Kate, we'll start with you.
Cool. Hi, everyone. I'm Kate. I'm head of customer enablement at GlideApps, and so we help people make software without code. So I think that's kind of an interesting perspective to be at WECode from. But I've been working at startups for a while. Before that, I was a teacher in education. And in college, I was actually an English major. So I've had like a lot of pivots, but ultimately I'm now a leader at a tech company. So I'm excited to talk to you all about that.
Hi everyone, my name is Sharita Rustanovable. I am the Vice President of Startup Banking at JP Morgan. So my focus is on working with early stage tech founders, anywhere from the point of inception, so you could be building in your dorm room, all the way to the Series A mark. And my background is, prior to this, I was at Silicon Valley Bank, also working with early stage tech startups. I took a year off to then go start a startup community called A2C. It's focused on access to capital, community connections, just really building the community up here in Boston and thinking about how we can continue to support underrepresented, underinvested founders. And then also spent some time in venture where I helped a couple of VC firms focus on supporting their portfolio companies, LP summits, and also just continuing to build the community up.
Oh, I don't need that. I have. I forgot I have one right here. Hi, everybody. I'm Allison Byers, and everything I do is working toward expanding access to early stage capital. I am the founder and CEO of Scroobius. We are a capital access platform that's changing how founders and investors connect with each other. And I'm an angel investor myself. I also co-authored California's VC diversity law. And thank you for the quiet class. And just authored a book, which you can pre-order now, called Fundraising for the Rest of Us. I'm really passionate about entrepreneurship. I've been in startup land for about 20 years. I've raised over $11 million between my two companies, and I'm just thrilled to be here today and talk to you all about it.
Hi everyone, my name is Cara Peterson, so happy to be here today with this amazing panel. Thank you very much for the invitation, and just lovely to see such a beautiful room full of bright, amazing young women that are interested in this space. It's truly inspiring. So as mentioned, I am the co-founder of Describe AI, which is a legal tech company. We are one of the rare companies that's self-funded, which is an interesting path to take when you're building. So no offense to the funding folks on the panel. Hey, it's all good.
Best way.
Right, exactly. But through this journey, we are using AI to try to solve some of the access to justice issues that we have in our legal system and disrupt a very sort of old-fashioned and industry that really needs some disruption, which is the judicial system. But along the way, I've met people like the people on this panel and really just fallen in love with the Boston ecosystem, and particularly the women that work in this ecosystem in tech and AI, and how incredible this community is. So very happy to be talking with you today and telling you more about how we're building here in Boston.
Thank you so much for all of those intros. For you guys to know, the format of the panel is I'm going to ask some speaker-specific questions to start off the panel. Then I'm going to move to some more general questions that any panelist is free to just hop in and speak about if they feel inclined. And then we'll have some time for general questions from the audience members at the end. So Kate, starting with you, you've worked across education and multiple tech startups in roles that aren't traditionally considered technical. How did you navigate entering and growing within the tech startup space without a technical background, and what skills helped you succeed most?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, like, I've always been someone who was very drawn to technology, but throughout my educational journey, I was never presented the opportunity to learn to code. I took the computer classes in middle school, and they were about like how to use Microsoft Office Suite, which is even more comical now because it's like even that is like an old school program, and it was like make a moving animation on a PowerPoint slide. It's crazy. And so that is what the computer class was for me, and I'm not that old. And I was just really interested in technology, but I didn't know how to code or how to be an engineer, and I didn't have the pathway to do that. And so when I graduated from college, I started working in education, but I found myself really quickly drawn to the technology that teachers use. And so I became more of like a tech coach for students and teachers. And from that lens, I was using all of these technologies and interacting with all of these companies and realizing that the companies weren't meeting the needs of the students and teachers. There was like a real disconnect there because these engineers weren't teachers. And how can you solve a problem for people that you don't like deeply understand yourself? And so that really inspired me to pivot, and I first went into an education technology company. So I was like a subject matter expert, and that allowed me to learn a lot about building technologies, and then I just kind of kept getting closer and closer to the tech from there. And I will say that like the language of being technical or not is like kind of my enemy, because I think that that language makes people feel like, oh, well, I'm not technical, so I couldn't do that, right? But what does it mean to be technical? Like, you can do it, you can learn that, you can do whatever. And so I think that mindset really just helped me just keep learning and keep pursuing the things that I was interested in.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think building off of kind of this experience with maybe not having like a traditional experience going into the role that you ended up being in, Cara, as the founder of Describe, as you mentioned, an AI-powered legal research platform built with a strong emphasis on accuracy and trust. What were some of the biggest learning curves you faced entering tech entrepreneurship from a non-traditional background, and how did you overcome them?
Yeah, so my background, believe it or not, is actually in higher education for a long time. So I actually worked at Harvard once, believe it or not, at Chan. So anyway, I had a very funny path to being an entrepreneur, which just shows that really anyone can do it. And especially, I love the comment about the non-technical is like, don't think of it that way. And that it's, it is open to different kinds of people. But I would say the biggest challenge for me was the legal space is really complicated, which is obviously why it's hard to disrupt. But you're dealing with a class of potential users, attorneys, right, who are extraordinarily risk averse, right, because they need to be, right. When you're an attorney, you need to have a very high bar for what could be wrong, but also not necessarily technically focused. So we were very lucky in that the path we took, because when this was all starting about 3 years ago, there were people creating wrappers and other things that were, not deeply built tech themselves. So we took the path where we were really investing in the technology. So fortunately, my co-founder is a data scientist and is a computer scientist, and he always says that the idea that engineers won't be needed anymore is ridiculous, because really the only people who can build things at scale are the ones who understand that. So I think overcoming skepticism in legal is probably one of the biggest hurdles for AI. There's just an inherent skepticism of technology and change, and just the risk that AI brings is particularly scary to attorneys. So that's why we try to lead with a lot of transparency and trust, and showing people what we're building to try to show folks that we're building different. So.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Switching more now to the funding angle, Sharita, from your experience working with early stage tech founders, what are some of the most common challenges founders face when it comes to accessing capital, and how can they better prepare themselves for those conversations?
Yeah, absolutely. I love this question. I would say that, so as I just mentioned, a lot of my background, I've never been fully a founder building my own company, but I have worked with a lot of founders that have incredible ideas, and especially when I'm working with the early stage folks, having an idea is always, really, really exciting when folks are like, okay, there's this idea, I think it's gonna make money, I think this is where I wanna go. But one of the challenges that I've actually noticed as I've started working with founders is it's not just about the idea, it's about the problem that you want to solve. and being just super obsessed with that problem. When you wake up in the morning, what is something that bothers you every single day, and it's something that you want to solve and you can't stop thinking about it, and you're super curious about what are the ways to go about solving that problem. And I feel like when a founder has that very, very clear problem that they want to solve, that allows for them to really talk about their idea when they're going to raise for funding. Because an idea is all about really how you position it, and also how do you position it and talk to founders and think about reducing the risk to founders as well. So when I think about preparation, I think about being in some of those rooms, trying to get in front of as many people, learn about what are some of the things that people are curious about when you're talking about your problem. Who could your potential customers be? And when you start building this out, it's also about reiterating on that feedback. I also find that in terms of accessing capital, I think one of my greatest mentors and some of the founders that I've interacted with, they're like, honestly, if you could get 100 no's, that's a great sign, because it means that you're constantly knowing like when to pivot, getting that constant feedback. And also, if you're able to adapt fast to that, that's also another way for you to continue to reiterate on your idea. So it's a combination of really just being prepared about what you're trying to solve, trying to find those mentors, the support in the community. I know we'll talk a little bit more about the community side, and then just continuing to reiterate on that.
Yeah, thank you. Kind of building off of the challenges of accessing capital, Allison, you've successfully raised venture funding across multiple companies, founded Scroobius to expand access to early stage capital, and authored a soon-to-be-released book, Fundraising for the Rest of Us, to provide founders with the guide you wish you had when you were raising funding for your own startups. How did your personal fundraising experience shape your view of the venture ecosystem, and what do you think most founders misunderstand about what it takes to raise capital?
Absolutely. All right, I'm going to give you guys the abridged version of my story and why I care so much, and why I give somewhat counterintuitive advice most of the time, especially to students who are learning about entrepreneurship. So I became an entrepreneur when I spun a medical device company out of MIT with scientific co-founders in a hospital system here. Did not go to anything like what you're going to right now. I didn't know anything about startup land or fundraising. Probably should have. We did raise about 10 million for that company, and then I could not raise our next round of funding. It's called the Series B round of funding, where you get the bigger checks because that's what you need to grow. So we ended up selling it, and we did something called an asset sale, which means another company acquires the assets of your company, and the rest of it is basically dissolved. It is not the exit or the end of a company that most founders would want. The acquiring company just happened to have an all-male leadership team. We happened to have an all-female leadership team. And I watched them raise $55 million after that happened. That was when I researched the space of capital allocation and fundraising and venture and all the things that I had never thought to research before. And I'm going to give you some statistics that are not meant to dissuade you, but they're meant to inform you so that you can make good choices having the information. When you look at venture capital in particular, it is one source of money for your business. There are many other sources. Venture capital gives nationally 1.2% of its dollars to women founders. In our state of Massachusetts, that number is 0.5%. For me, when I learned those, they're pretty easy to find, it was freeing because I understood that I had to stop blaming myself for failure. This was a system failing me. And that is what I want people to know. When you think about accessing capital, sometimes, most of the time, if you're underrepresented, and by the way, if you're a Black founder, if you're a Hispanic founder, if you're an intersecting person, or demographics, the numbers just keep going down. It's very similar no matter what underrepresented category you identify with. It's understanding all the different options available to you and figuring out how you work in the systems that let you access what you need to build a successful company, because that's what money is for. So don't get wrapped up in, I want to be in the paper because I raised $50 million. That's not the point. You don't win, you use it to build a company. And if you don't need it to build a company, don't go look for it. There's a whole lot more I could say on it, but that's my big message.
Thank you. Switching back to the startup side, we'll get to the funding again later. Kate, for students interested in startups but unsure where they fit outside of engineering or product roles, how would you recommend they identify opportunities that still allow them to be deeply involved in building tech-driven companies?
Yeah, great question. I would say that a company has lots of departments, and the engineering department is one of them. And all the other departments combined are actually probably bigger than that department. So consider, if you're thinking about the roles at a company, there's a whole support team, there's a whole sales team, there's a whole marketing team. There can be lots of different departments that sometimes are, I'll use the word technical, not technical at all. There's a whole content team that might be creating the ads that you see or the blogs that you read or any of that kind of stuff. So if you're interested in technology, there are so many different ways to be involved building companies and contributing. And what I do is think very deeply about how to make the products that the engineers make easier for our users to understand and use. And what that means is that if I have good relationships with the engineers, I can turn to them and say, would you change that thing actually? Because I think it's a little bit too hard. Or could we add like a hint here that says something else? I think that would be really helpful. And they do it. And so in that way, I can actually change the product and I can actually help guide the engineers in what they are making, and I can do all of that without code. The last thing that I will say is that you don't have to know how to write code anymore. And I know that that might be scary for this room and that that's a new development, but I wrote code this week. And with these tools like Claude Code, I think that the world that you all are gonna enter into companies, it's gonna be different. And so I think that that can be scary, but in the startup world, part of what's exciting, I think, is adapting to these changes all the time and thinking about how am I gonna use that new thing to fix my problem? How am I gonna challenge my assumptions about how to fix the problem and instead listen really carefully to what people need and use these breakthroughs to help those people more. And so I think that that can be exciting.
Thank you. Shifting more to to emphasizing the community aspect of startup building, Cara, through your work with building AI Boston and supporting women entrepreneurs, what insights have you gained about ethical AI development and the importance of community in shaping responsible innovation?
Yeah, that's a great one. But can I quickly speak to the last point?
Of course.
Okay. So totally understand and agree that like the way that you're going to be building things is going to be different because of the idea of anyone can code. But I do think one of the things that's really happening is the quality of these tools. There's vast differences, right? Like people can, and this happens in legal tech all the time, that people think they can just kind of vibe code something in a weekend and it's going to be really good, and that's just not true. So I really think that there's going to be a differentiation in the market in terms of quality of tools, where there are informed professionals like yourselves that are either maybe not coding everything themselves, but overseeing the architecture, overseeing the landscape of what's happening versus just everybody, jumping onto a vibe coding platform and building something. Especially in high-risk industries like, medical or legal. And I'm not saying that was what was being implied, but I do think some of the Claude can just do it is overstated and frankly wrong. It's going to absolutely change the way you do things, but I still think there's an incredible importance for people who understand at a high level that should be reassuring. That's just me. We'll see what happens. But back to the community aspect again, and this is a lot of what Allison was talking about. I mean, there's so much work to do. When I learned those numbers, I was completely blown away. I had not heard those numbers, how bad they were, and I was also particularly unhappy to hear that it was worse in Massachusetts. Right, I kind of thought arrogantly that we would probably be doing better than everywhere else, and indeed we aren't. So that's kind of ridiculous. But our community, like I was saying earlier, has some really amazing things going for it. There's been this sort of awakening, I think, or maybe an awakening for me because I wasn't involved in it, so to me it was new. But we have female leadership across our government, state, city, We have all kinds of amazing women in fundraising, women in entrepreneurship. So I think there's a change afoot, but it won't happen unless we continuously bring it up and continuously talk about this. So, you know, Allison's book, the things that we're doing are really important. And so in terms of nurturing community, that's why we started the show and why I'm getting very involved in ethical AI work in particular, because we will build different things than the guys will, okay, than the usual tech bros will. And right now with AI, if we don't intentionally build things that are different than what the tech bros usually will always build, we will end up in a world that we have now. A very famous person went to this university who got us where we are now, right? So we don't want that. If we want to build things that are better for the world and better for women and girls, we need to build it ourselves. So it's not an easy road. It's something that's going to be difficult, but if there is a place where I think we can have some directionality to it and we can lead, I think it's actually right here in Boston, in Cambridge. I think we have all the pieces we need to be a leader, but it's going to take a lot of elbows. Allison and I both spend a lot of time with our elbows out there, and it's crucial. And of course, when you're older, like, you know, you've seen a lot, maybe you don't really care who you're making angry anymore. At least I can speak for myself. But I had a recent experience where there was a new initiative launching that was coming, I won't name names, but was coming off very Brotopia-like. And, you know, we had to have a discussion with them offline and say, because it was some other people, I won't name names, but where we said, y'all have to, like, think of your approach. So it's that squeaky wheel, it's that constant reminding that we're here and we're not going away. So together, I think we can get up from, what was it, 0.00 whatever percent?
0.05.
Let's get up to 1%, y'all.
Thank you for those insights. Building off of the importance of community, Sharita, you've spent much of your career building equitable founder-first ecosystems, whether through JP Morgan, Goldhouse, or NAAP. What does creating an inclusive and supportive startup community look like in practice, and what role can founders play in supporting one another as they scale?
Absolutely. And I just want to echo off of the comments that were made as well, that, you know, when we think about these rooms, one, like this room that we are in is so rare to just be in a room full of all women. And I see just so much from just like being in these startup communities sometimes. So in the past, I kind of come from a banking landscape where it's not the most diverse industry. And so when I think about also putting that into the startup practice and seeing myself like in these rooms, but also with founders in these rooms, and not seeing a lot of people that look like us, that's something that has always been, you know, top of mind when I think about creating these intentional and inclusive communities. And so for those of you that do want to do more startup building or community building, whether it's in the startup landscape or any part of the entrepreneur journey, I truly think that it's about thinking about how to be intentional with the design of whatever you are putting on. Always ask yourself, who is not in these rooms? Who is not a part of the conversation? And some of the work that I've done at Goldhouse, so Goldhouse is actually a nonprofit that's focused on advancing Asian American, Pacific Islander folks in both startup space and also music, media, and entertainment, really reshaping the narrative. And one of my mentors at Goldhouse actually told me that if you are not invited to sit at the table, you should start building your own house. And that's something that I've always thought in the back of my mind when I think about curating these communities, when I think about even who do we put on some of the panels? Who are the leaders that are giving words of wisdom, words of advice, and do they look like us? Do they also have our similar backgrounds, experiences? And if not, how can we start to change that? How can we start building our house, bringing the right people in the room? And I think the other aspect of it too is this idea of reciprocity in terms of the folks that have made it, the leaders that have gone and paved the way, how can we start bringing them back? And then start to build that circle out where when we bring these leaders into the room, they inspire the next generation. And then you all as the next generation, when you make it, how can you give back to the next generation of folks that want to be like you as well? And that's the kind of key practices that I think about in community building, and being able to also drive value with each event that you're putting on, ensuring that you're getting feedback from the people that are attending events or different community groups, and understanding, are the things that you're delivering and putting out inclusive and also helpful for the folks that are coming in. So getting that feedback. If there's one thing to take away is feedback, and just being intentional about curating the rooms.
Thank you. We'll speak a little bit more about returning to the community theme during the general questions, but Allison, there's a lot of buzz around startups and venture funding in the media, and I know especially in education spaces like Harvard and other colleges, and in general in the tech ecosystem. For students interested in entrepreneurship, how should they think about building a sustainable business in a space that they actually care about, rather than building simply to fit a traditional funding mold?
Great question. So, I mean, I'm going to go back to a little bit of where I ended on my last comment, but when you think about entrepreneurship, the whole point of it is to create something better than what exists today, right? To advance society, to solve a problem, something you care about, that you feel the best way to do it is to start a company to solve it. How do you build that? Requires usually some money, right? Some capital, which a lot of people don't have enough to be able to do it without getting it from somewhere else. Venture capital is the darling of the media and the news and our educators, and everyone talks about it. And I'm not anti-venture capital. I have a lot of friends in venture, and I do work there in the nonprofit space. But it's only one type, and it's only meant for one specific kind of business that can scale very quickly and then be sold. That's not most businesses. And so when you think about the reason you're going to start a company, which is one of the hardest jobs you can do, don't focus on that kind of shiny object. It's not the point. The point is what aligns with how you want to build your business. Because there's all kinds of capital, both from investors who own part of your company, you're selling shares of it, to debt or non-dilutive options where you're not under that model. And every source of money has its own motivations and needs, so you need to consider what is right for you. Why are you doing this? And it's just such a misunderstood principle for people who want to become founders, that they think the first thing I got to do is make my pitch, and I'm going to go pitch all these VCs, and I'm going to get VC money, and I'm going to be on the cover of the alumni magazine and whatever. But that's not the reason you start a company. And if it is the reason you start a company, that's going to be a tough go.
Wonderful. I think that was such a great way to close out our individual questions. Yeah. So we'll move on to general questions now, and then we'll open the Q&A up to the audience. So I think this one's kind of directed at all of you, but each of you engages with startups from a different angle, whether it be working on startup teams, founding them, or funding them. So from your unique perspective, what do you think is the most important aspect or thing for a startup to succeed in the long term, especially in early stages? Feel free to just let me know which one of you wants to go first.
I have a small thing I'd mention in that people maybe don't think about as much, is that to be a successful, it doesn't always have to be this way, but it helps, I think, to be a good storyteller, right? And that's something we often don't think about. And of course, I'm a communications person, so maybe I have a predisposition to think about that. But there was an article recently, I can't remember which publication, but they were talking about this importance of it and being able to tell your own narrative, and not just like we were talking about like for pitch decks, right, or for that, but to be able to create a presence and an explanation for who you are and why what your approach is different. Goes back to that problem you're solving. So, it is uncomfortable for many people to learn how to talk about themselves and sort of have that like networking thing, but it's becoming even more and more important, which is kind of the irony of AI, right? That interpersonal and being able to talk to people really one-on-one is, I think, becoming more and more important. So make sure you've got you're practicing that as well is important.
I mean, so I can always jump in, so other people jump in too. But when you talk about the success, the long-term success of a company or staying with it, basically, when we're talking about entrepreneurship, is burnout is a real thing. I physically burned out at my last company. Like I, in my 30s, got shingles on my face because I was going so hard. No one should ever do that, and I refuse to do that again. And a big lesson I took away from it is you have to be able to separate your personal identity from the company you started. It is so crucial to being able to stick with it for the long term. It's how I've been able to build my company Scroobius now for 6 years. This has not been an easy go. This has not worked out according to the plan I made when I first started. Nobody's company does. But it's because I now have that higher level view of my life is different than this company. And it gives you some space and some separation, and you don't take everything so deeply because business is different. And I do think that there are true gendered stereotypes here where men are better at that. They more easily separate. My business is here, and me personally, I'm here. I take money from people, that's in the business, that is different than my personal. We can have separate relationships. We have to learn how to do that because women have not been able to fully participate in our economy and in capitalism until fairly recently, and I'd argue we still really aren't. So that's a skill that we have to learn, and it really does contribute to the long-term success of what you're building.
I can jump in. I would say, so I think, we've touched upon a lot of the problem aspect and also like staying true to yourself. I think along with that, I'll just add that, sometimes when you're actively building a company, I've worked with a lot of founders where they still, like, they strongly believe in this problem and this mission, but sometimes it's like the external forces that have made it hard for them to keep going. So I would say like this idea of just being very, very true to yourself and being persistent in believing in the thing that you want to solve and the mission that you're going for. Even when everything is hard and tough, just being able to find those mentors in the community, I think that's really what ultimately sets up a lot of founders up for success, is that someone that you can call, someone that you can go to when things get really tough. And then on top of that, I would say that as companies are scaling, I've seen folks where, I meet them literally at their dorm room or as they're building, and then 3 years later, they go and raise from some of the top venture funds in the world. And I think a lot of the things that they've talked about is also, you think about building, sometimes your head's down the entire time, but really you also need to be thinking about the culture that you're building within your startup. So as companies scale very, very fast, you may go from 6 months you have 3 people to suddenly it's like 20 to 50 to 100 very, very fast. And reflecting back on what kind of culture do you want to build? What kind of leader do you want to be? And how do you want to show up for the people that are a part of your team, that believe in you and the mission? I think that's also the key to long-term success for startups.
Wow, so much good stuff is being said. I'm going to try to combine it all into my answer, which is a little bit cheating. But I totally agree about the culture. I think we have to create cultures that we don't have an example of, right? Because we've got these broy cultures. And with AI, it's particularly important, and this vibe code culture that we're no, how can we actually leverage this to be useful and not vibey, right? I don't need vibes, I need solutions, and those are different things. And I also think that this skill of separating work from personal is so important. And I think that empathy is our superpower. And I think that we have it in a way that a lot of folks who are founders, that other 99.9999%, they don't have it like we have it. And it makes a difference. It makes a difference in the culture that we build. It makes a difference in the technology that we build. And it just makes a really big difference. And I think part of that empathy is always challenging your assumption about what the solution is to the problem. Because you might have an idea and you're like, this is how I'm going to fix it. And then you're going. You've hired 100 people. You're going. And suddenly it seems like your solution is not fixing that problem for those people anymore. And all that means is that you just got to talk to those people and figure out how to pivot and how to adjust. and really harness your empathy to really listen to them so that your solution is solving their problem. So yes to all of it, and like everyone, build things, and I'm so excited to see what you build.
Great. Well, a lot of you have already touched upon this about the community aspect, but just wanted to ask this more generally. What role has community, whether mentors, peers, or professional networks, played in your entrepreneurial journeys, and why do you think those relationships matter in entrepreneurship?
I'll go first since I went last on this. For me, community is huge. I actually worked in the community industry for a little bit at one of the startups that I was at, and I think especially when you are in rooms where you're often the only person who looks or sounds like you in that room, being able to walk out of that room and text someone like, oh my God, this is what just happened in that room, is so good, right? That's part of the thing that like supercharges you to be able to be in that room. And I totally failed to mention it, but I also wrote a book. It's called Imposter, and it's about feeling like an imposter in those rooms. And the reason that I have found success and that I talk about in the book is like having that network of people that can really just be the wind behind you, and especially during those moments when you're like, I'm tired of being in that room. This is too hard. I could do something else that is less hard and my life would be easier. I'm gonna leave. That's the moment where those other people need to call you and be like, don't you leave, don't do that. Like, let's go see a movie, and on Monday you're gonna show up. And that's really, really important to have that network of people. So you need to find your table of people that are gonna push you like that when you need it.
Yeah, I think just kind of going off of that, I would say that so I'm actually relatively new to the startup ecosystem. It only really started when I joined SVB, and that was when I learned everything from like the venture rounds to different access to capital. But I think a lot of it, I still remember when I first joined SVB and my sudden role was to support all these early stage founders, and I'm like, I don't even know like what they do on the day-to-day, and like how do they deal with their problems, et cetera. And I actually went and asked my manager, and I asked her, like, how do I just like learn this thing? How do I start to build my network, and so that when I build my network, I can start supporting these founders? And I think the key takeaway from how she kind of gave me the advice was just put yourself out there. Even if it's scary, even if it's like a cold DM to someone that just inspires you, you never know, because that DM could change your life, and it honestly did for me. Like I started at one point just messaging everybody. I like looked on LinkedIn and I was like, startup people and startup founders, like startup VCs, and I started cold DMing them and asking them like, hey, can I just learn more about what you do and how you support the startup community? What are you building? And having those conversations ultimately put me in these rooms where people were like, okay, let's grab coffee. Hey, maybe you should meet this person. Maybe there's another person that you should talk to that has gone through a similar journey. Maybe they're new to Boston and they want to learn more about this, and you guys should connect. And I think having those experiences and just putting myself out there and meeting a total stranger, or walking into rooms where maybe I didn't know anyone at all, and just going up and saying, hi, hey, I want to learn more, and being curious about that, has gotten me to where I am today, where now I feel like in building the community, now I'm able to build my networks, but also try to build communities for other people so that they can experience the similar network effects. So that's a long-winded answer of just continuously put yourself in rooms that challenge you, and also put yourself out there, because you never know. You may bump into the next person down the street who could change your life.
So, I mean, when we talk about community and both of those great answers, really at the end of the day, no matter what you code, no matter how AI advances, we are human beings, and access follows relationships and trust. It does, and it always will, and that's why who you know matters. When you think about like putting yourself out there, being in rooms, all of that totally true. Maybe it's not your style. Maybe the thought of going into a room where there's a bunch of people talking to each other and it's loud, it like makes you want to throw up and leave. It does for me a lot of the time. So find your way where you're comfortable. Like for me, I'm actually way more comfortable sitting up here talking. Like I love being on a stage talking to people. I'm so much more comfortable than entering that room I just described. I leave, I really do. So What I want you to remember though is it's not just who's in your inner circle, because you're gonna meet way too many people for that to happen, right? Like I meet so many people. When you get into entrepreneurship, you start meeting insane numbers of people all the time. But it's the power of what's called a weak tie that gets you access. You don't have to be best friends with everyone. You don't have to go to every event, but you need to have an authentic back and forth with as many people as you can so that you remember each other. And then when something relevant comes up, a door is opened for you, or you open the door for the other person. And the more weak ties you have in the startup ecosystem, it can just be one conversation where you felt that connection. It opens so much. Like, Cara and I were weak ties, and she invited me on her podcast. It was amazing. And now we help each other do all kinds of things. Same with Sharita, right?
That's a strong tie. We're a strong tie.
Now we're a strong tie. Sometimes weak ties turn into strong ties,
yeah.
But you have to start somewhere. Right. And so networking doesn't have to mean the scary part of networking, but you do need to be open to everyone who comes your way and be your actual self and have that trust back and forth.
And I think one of the most overlooked but sort of most important parts of this whole thing is actually the intergenerational connections that women make. And again, this is obviously a very specific event, so not criticizing in any way, but there's so many groups in Boston. You could be at a Women in Technology or Women in A event every single night if you wanted. Like, it's great. So just even finding those is amazing. But where the excitement for me and Gen X and all that, like, the wisdom that gets shared across the generations between women is incredible. And so I would say find ways, that if you're networking or you're out, don't only go in a group that's very similar to you, either age-wise or demographic or, what university. There's so much wisdom in the community colleges. There's so much wisdom in just people you maybe wouldn't think of. One of my favorite AI experts in town is in her 80s. I mean, it's amazing, you know who I mean. Yeah. So there's just a really interesting space where we can share the wisdom rather than the knowledge. So there's that. I think that is really important. And just again, there is the community. Boston is a small town. We like to think of ourselves as a big city. We're a small town. So even if you just enter whatever avenue you enter through some of these groups, you will all of a sudden have these weak ties that Allison was talking about. It's a very connected community, and just getting in, and you're going to find people who want to help you then navigate it. It's a very generous space, I think, and it's pretty special.
Thank you all so much. I have more questions, but honestly, I'd rather give the opportunity to the audience members to ask anything that they'd like, and if not, then we can just keep going. But yeah, feel free to project, but if not, I can just hand you the mic. Yeah. Okay, I'll hand you a mic.
Hello, thank you so much. I really enjoyed the talking and to get all the insights. So I'm Sababa, I'm a student at Connecticut College. So my question is what is one of the insights or feedback you got in early stage that actually have to rethink the solution you were building as an entrepreneur?
So I can take that one since we built something. When we first started, our intention, neither myself or my co-founder are attorneys, and so we really wanted to build for pro se litigants, which are people who are representing themselves. We thought that was really the way to go, that's the way we could do all kinds of good in the world. Quickly realized that was such a giant hill to climb for various reasons I won't go into, that the way we could actually make the biggest impact was to help the attorneys who were helping the people, which is, it changed the business model, it changed who we were selling to, it changed a lot of different things. So I guess my thought on it more generally is be ready to pivot, and then pivot again, and then pivot again, and then pivot again, because like you were saying, where you think your path is and then where you end up is never the same. So just be flexible and don't get too upset if your original, thought pattern of how it was going to go takes a really sharp turn. It can be a good thing. So.
Yeah, I mean, I got market feedback, not from a person, but I incorporated my company a month before COVID showed up, and my entire business plan was an in-person regional rollout. So in the trash. I did that for a year. I built that business plan in the trash. So sometimes it's feedback from your customers, sometimes it's feedback from mentors or your partners, sometimes the market gives you feedback. and you just have to completely shift how you're going about it. I can tell you actually one of the pieces of feedback I got from a VC in town was our platform is video mandatory. If you want to connect with someone, you have to film some short videos because it's, for me, all about the power of understanding and connecting with humans, and that's how we intake information. She said, I don't watch videos. No one's going to watch videos online. A month before COVID showed up. And that was the issue with my business plan. So some feedback you take, some feedback is forced on you, some feedback you got to incorporate as you think is best.
Yeah, I was head of learning at a company that you might have heard of called Fiveable. It helps students prepare for AP exams. I see some nods. I hope it was helpful. We were trying to get you ready for those tests. And I was working there during COVID. And so we were like, oh, our whole thing is helping students get ready for these tests. And then COVID happened and all of the schools closed. And suddenly all of the students didn't have school to go to anymore. And so we thought about our mission and our goal, which was to just help these students, and ended up pivoting and building an entire another product where we were school. And we started with a smaller pilot program. Maybe you all the right age, maybe some of you took them. So took some of those classes where we partnered with teachers from schools and said, well, you just teach class for students who no longer have access to this class that they needed in school, but they still want to take this test. And so if you stay really close to your problem, you can pivot. Like you were saying, you realized I want to help these people who are representing themselves, but I realized the solution I thought, that's not helping. I'm going to try a different thing, but I'm still going to help those same people. And different things can impact that. So it's just like being flexible, really more flexible than you thought you were going to have to be.
Thank you. My name is Abigail Briones. My question is, leading startups is very hard. And what's a good framework for doing irreversible decisions? And how do you ensure that you make the right decision in that case without complete information?
I'm still buffering on that, but I don't have a whole framework, but I would say as much as you can leverage data to make decisions instead of assumptions, that's always going to be better, right? Sometimes you don't have data for a lot of different reasons, but I would say as you're thinking about what's part of my framework, I would encourage data as much as you can get it to be part of it.
Yeah, I guess. I would say when I spoke to a lot of founders, I definitely agree on the data standpoint. The other aspect of it is just being like very organized with your decision making. So like as you're having customer interviews or you're talking to folks that may or may not be interested in the product, it's a matter of, okay, you're not gonna have everybody's feedback and then try to like solve for everybody's problems or all their issues, but it's a matter of recognizing patterns and trends. Like what are the things that you see as like a holistic pattern? What are the key takeaways from some of your many customer discoveries, and then consistently reiterating on that.
Next question.
So outside of soft skills, what are like key technical skills you would recommend students like us to have, since coding and syntax is kind of going more towards less important?
I mean, I think it's so important to stay on top of all these advancements. It's really interesting. I can tell you one of like, a year ago, I would have said my biggest regret is that I never learned how to code. Right, in all my education, I'm a non-technical founder. I wish I had learned that. I just skipped past it when when people started learning. I just didn't, and I felt so behind my whole career. I was like, I wish I knew how to do this for myself, because I like to know how to do things for myself. I now talk to terminals. I use Claude Code, right? I'm making code without code. So empowering. I feel like I can do things for myself. I know I am so far behind the ball right now, even like the fact that I opened a terminal for the first time and I'm like, I am the shit, right? Like I'm so good at this now, is don't make the mistake that I did and not inform yourself of how to use today's tools. Everything is moving so much faster, right? The half-life is so much shorter than it was when I'm not gonna speak for anyone else's age, when I was younger. But make sure, even if you're not using it every day, even if that's not your focus or your area of study or where you think you're going, if there are tools that people are incorporating to create, just use them. Get used to them. Make sure that you understand what is happening with technological advancements. It will do you well no matter where your career goes, to have that hands-on experience with where technology is going.
I will add one more thing. We're starting to start talking about like orchestration of multiple agents. You might have been starting to read about this, people talking about this. It's not going to be the case that there will be no engineers. I don't think that's ever going to be the case. Just because Claude Code in your terminal can write the code, you are so much more ahead if you already understand that syntax, right? You already understand everything about what it wrote. You can review that. Maybe you can oversee these agents that are actually doing the writing of the code. You're so much further ahead than someone like me who doesn't code, right? Claude spits that out and I'm like, okay, like I hope that's right, you know? But I think that there's still gonna be so much use for folks who studied this, who have this technical training. It might just look a little bit different than we thought it was gonna look last year, but that doesn't mean that we don't need those skills and that they aren't gonna be important. We just haven't learned yet how the landscape is gonna look now that we have some of these different tools.
Right, perhaps more like you're the conductor than the person playing an individual instrument, right? And one of the themes I've been hearing is sort of from the talking heads out there is this reemergence of liberal arts, which I think would be the most wonderful, amazing like irony out of like a technical advance. But you know, people should study philosophy, people should study communications, people should study liberal arts. So I'm not saying switch a liberal arts degree, but you know, the things that help us interpret and navigate through these moments is crucial.
Yeah, first of all, philosophy minor. But it's interesting to, like, when you say soft skill versus hard skill, I kind of go back to something I said before. Anything that we advance is made by humans, right? We're human beings. And so understanding how we act, how we think, what we need, that's not soft skill, right? Anything hard or how we classify that only makes the soft or the understanding of humans more important. So I think that's this reemergence of, you know, philosophy of liberal arts, like it never went away and it's important, but people talking about it again, it's because it's more important. We don't have to focus so much on the coding element, which means we have even more time to make it better for our own needs. And so I would, there's gotta be some other term besides soft and hard, something in the middle, I don't know.
We're at our time here today, but I'm gonna do one more question because we started 5 minutes late.
Thank you. Hello, and first of all, thank you so much for your wonderful insights. My name is Ruthie Latte, and I suppose my question is, especially I guess in the beginning of, you know, creating a startup or a company, kind of what I've been thinking a lot about is the trade-off between moving fast and kind of validating the assumptions that you're making, and then also kind of being really intentional about the decisions that you're making. And I'm just curious about your thoughts on how to kind of balance those two thoughts. Yeah, thank you.
I would say the tension is like even more intense now than it probably ever was, right? Because of the speed. Like if you take too long to like perfect something, then the market's passed you by and you're already out of date. So I really feel that tension, and I wish I had a good answer, but I don't. So yeah, maybe somebody else does. It's sort of an endless. I think about it every day, pretty much.
Yeah, it's a constant tension, and that's one thing to consider with entrepreneurship, right? Like you're all here because you're curious about startups, entrepreneurship. Maybe this is a path for you. when you think about what you're trying to solve or why that's interesting to you, there's also many ways to solve a problem. Starting a company isn't maybe the best way all the time, right? Because when you start a company, you are instantly in that tension of, it is a business. I care about advancing in an ethical, responsible, inclusive way, but if I don't do this thing, my company's going under. This is capitalism, right? And so you have a tension in that way with the economics of the business that you wouldn't have if you were in academia, in a giant company where you're a salaried employee, right? You have different forces at play, and you're never not gonna have that in a startup. You're always going to have to balance and compromise, and it's not always gonna feel comfortable.
All right, well, looks like we've come to the end of our panel and our time here today. Can we all please give the speakers a big round of applause? Thank you, Kate, Sharita, Cara, and Allison, and all of you so much for your time. We absolutely loved having you guys here with us today. If you guys have any more questions, please wait until the speakers can get out of the room to ask them so we don't crowd the area. But thank you so much, and have a wonderful rest of your conference day. Thank you. Thank you.